So, uh, hello everyone, and welcome to Electronic Technocrat, your own techie guy. So, here with us today is a very exceptional speaker. I met him through the Red Hat Summit when he was a lead sponsor in that summit. He has over 12 years of marketing ops and developer product management experience. Before Avalara, Scott was in the Microsoft ecosystem for the last 10 years, and most recently focusing on US developer product marketing team, specifically focusing on developer tools at Microsoft, as well as Java at Microsoft across the US market. He recently joined Avalara as a senior product marketing manager. Avalara is a tax cloud compliance company focused on numerous tax types and industries. It is a global leader in the tax automation software. Avalara is also a leading provider of cloud-based tax compliance. So today, I proudly and honorably announce you the very special guest on my channel. Please welcome Mr. Scott Soine. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, that was a warm welcome, and I appreciate the intro. That was really nice. I will first share my screen here.
Yes.
Let me do that. I'm actually going to share, I think, let me see here. Hold on one sec. Because
Sure.
I know when you go into presenter mode, it like switches.
Switches,
so
yeah. Yeah, that's
let me
good.
do that. And I'm going to go into presenter mode. Can you guys see that okay?
Not yet, sir.
Hold on, let me just see. Let me
Sure.
make sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I hope everyone can see it. Please type yes.
Yeah, and then now it should be bigger, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, cool. Welcome. Well, thanks. Yeah, thanks for that warm welcome, and thanks for letting me talk to the community. I really appreciate it. As I walked through of how I've kind of evolved my developer marketing, you will see community outreach and reaching communities where they are as the key point of that. So I'll just dive in. And I want to make this as valuable to everyone as possible. So feel free to ask questions in the nod. If you see any questions that come up in the chat, feel free to stop me anytime. And then we can open up for Q&A too at the end. But if there's anything that I talk about that you have initial questions, happy to stop the, kind of my spiel on how I do developer marketing and answer them. So, all right, I'll dive into it. And this is kind of the high level developer engagement that I learned over time at Microsoft, and then I've kind of applied it to Avalara as well. So obviously, I think everybody knows when you're doing developer marketing, you want to drive impact through enhancements in order to grow the ecosystem of developers. But how do you do that? The first pillar down there on the left is developer enablement. And I think this is where a lot of companies, big and small, honestly, sometimes fail. And somebody in a company might be like, hey, we got to start building a developer community. And they think building a developer community will take, 3 to 6 months and it will happen and people will engage. And you actually don't have to do the work. And that's where ultimately I think any DevRel developer marketing positions sometimes fail. It's a long play, it's a consistent play, and what you need to do is reach developer communities at scale. You also need to go where developers are. So that means going at the lowest level of like user groups, sponsoring user groups, or even just sponsoring the food, the drinks, and everything at a user group to show that you support that community, and you also know that community is important. And then the other thing that is key when you're doing this is you can't just sponsor one event, throw $100,000 at it, and then all of a sudden think the developers are going to become loyal to your brand, it's something that is consistent. So say one thing that I've been a part of even at Microsoft and now sponsored at Avalara is the .NET Conf. I plan on sponsoring that for every year going forward, and not just popping in and then popping out. And the consistency is key with developers, and I'm sure some of you on this call are developers, and that. A lot of times companies will kind of do a bait and switch thing where it's like, hey, we support you, but then all of a sudden they're like, actually, we'll only support you now if you pay for something like that. And that's the worst thing you can basically do to lose a developer community. Now, as a developer or marketer, building community is huge, but it doesn't always show the ROI to your VP or C-suite when you need to do that. So what you also need to do is drive developer acquisition in accounts, and and also then activate those accounts. And I'll kind of talk about that. That goes from being unified as a developer kind of acquisition strategy. That means this department over here is not doing something touching that developer audience when this department over on the other side is not. You got to break down the silos and make sure within your company that you guys are talking and communicating and educating the developers the same way consistently. And again, that's how a lot of times companies lose their developer community or have the developer community turn on them. Like sometimes maybe it's a marketing email or some end of life service email that goes out without any context that can really cause customer discomfort and developers confusion, and to then undo that type of stuff sometimes takes longer than the ability of like building the community. So it is key to be connected on your GTM go-to-market strategies with developers. And then obviously, like I said before, product and business must be aligned. And then lastly, the last pillar there on the right is developer activation. And it's pretty straightforward, but it's key to basically activate the prime developers within a company and also the influencers. So we're talking about the ones that are implementing the service or architecture or whatever it is within a company to then, and then that trickles down. A lot of times you'll see sellers sell to the CFO or even a CMO, they buy it, but then the software or whatever is bought is not implemented, and ultimately they did not reach the developers or win the developers over. And ultimately that is either not implemented correctly, or maybe they just implement it for a year or bought a license for a year, and then they ultimately are not sticky and becoming a loyal customer. So I'll pause there. And then do you see any questions, or should I keep on going?
Sir, I'll prompt you once the session is completed so we can have a Q&A round.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
All right. And yes. Let me go on to the next slide. And this is kind of a busy slide. I know it might be harder to see, so I'll kind of walk through it. It just talks about developer engagements and the journey, and it's kind of doing a double click of what I've already talked about. Basically, and I know, Nanad, when we were talking about what to call this webinar, we called it basically the unmarketing to developers, because really there isn't really any developer marketing, and developers are basically turned off by marketing because it's really gimmicky. So really what you're going to be doing is educating them, informing them, and then letting them make their own decisions, because once they get a whiff of any type of marketing campaign or gimmicky kind of slogan, they definitely are turned off by that. That's for sure. So so they, obviously everybody goes through the kind of discover, explore, skill, and adopt kind of customer journey. I think that's probably the biggest for developers. A lot of times other parts of the company are just told what to do, but developers and engineers, I even go as far as like IT pros and security, because everything's being intertwined so much that they do kind of hold the keys to the company, and they have a huge influence on actually what will get prioritized and also what is implemented within a company's infrastructure or cloud architecture. So let me go down to the bottom in regards to discover. And again, that I said it before on the last slide, that this is kind of where companies ultimately fail. They don't consistently show up for their developers where they are. One of the places that is really key, but also a high investment activity, so I understand from the business side not always wanting to invest in this, is third-party events. And let me just define third-party events. That's like if Microsoft or Avalara is sponsoring like a PyCon or KubeCon or a .NET Conf, showing up where developers are and showing that, hey, we support this community is key. Now, I know like KubeCon type of sponsorships can cost, $253,000, $400,000. So there has to be a cost benefit of reaching the developers where they are, but also trying to get some business leads and also getting some, ROI within that event. And sometimes that is hard. I'll tell you, some events are easier than others, but it is something that is constantly, weighed to see if there's that actual ROI doing third-party events. One way, like with the .NET Conf, it's easy because it's virtual, but then you also aren't having that face-to-face communication. So there is those cost benefits. And I'll say too, I think there will be less investment in third-party events from companies for the next year or two, just because of how the economy is going. So it will be hard for a company, say smaller company like that I work for now, Avalara, to put 150,000 towards in one single event when we're dealing with the macroeconomic climate. But there are other ways of maximizing and getting developers interested in like learning about your product and getting updates. Like partner co-creation is key too. So what I mean by that is Microsoft has a huge partner network. You go through partner content like case studies, blogs, also coming on their webinars, different things like that. From an Avalara perspective, we actually have about 1,200 partners that enable our tax compliance software. Some like Shopify. So for example, right now, we are in the process of making a shipping verification app in the Shopify marketplace. We will do co-creation and co-marketing with Shopify to get the word out from that. And the amplification of Shopify through their developer network it just makes me scale more than if it was just me over here on Avalara doing a blog post and trying to get it out through our organic Twitter, for example. And then also community outreach. I already talked about that. Also, the community third-party events are key too. I think it's just as important to, if you're going to go to Java 1, it's just as important to also sponsor and support Java user groups, either around the US, around India, within the UK. I would say globally if you can, but obviously we don't always have unlimited sources of money. So I would say focus on your main money market account. I've been working in the US mostly, but there's also a lot of emerging accounts. I know with Avalara, we have a whole Brazil emerging account. Getting in at that ground level and supporting user groups goes a long way, and a lot of positive word of mouth comes out of that. And I think it's key, and it shows it shows you care. So, and then the other ones are like podcasts, like the Azure podcast, I remember reaches 16, 17,000 unique viewers. There's also the AWS developer podcast that has about 3,000 or 4,000 unique viewers each week. And then there's also the AWS podcast that has about 20,000. So getting the word out about how you're building is key too. And then once you move into the more of like number of developers engaged and you see those buying signals or interest signals from developers, you want to then feed them information that's relevant to them. Developing a developer newsletter that's language specific or even technology specific that just goes to them. Offering one-to-many immersion workshops where they can learn about the service for free using a sandbox and building with it and learning. And that goes a long way. Obviously, webinars, YouTube to complement those are key as well. And then lastly, you want them to adopt because ultimately we all roll up through a CTO, CMO, or even the CFO, and you need to show ROI. And again, I've said it 3 times, but that's sometimes the hardest with developer marketing because you want to engage. So you want to engage authentically with the community, and it's hard to show that those activities result in an ROI. So when it's key to keep people on board with developer community, you want to do through account or through partner type of marketing. And what that is doing open hacks, which are similar to kind of the immersion workshops I was talking about, but they're also like a hack to use, like say, Azure Static Web Apps or AvaTax. You can do that many different ways. You can also go to the point of, hey, this is a huge company, this is an enterprise company, and you can do one-on-one hands-on labs, and you get cloud solution architects to run these one-on-one labs and hands-on labs, and you learn all together all the different features, functionality, and what is coming from, say, that static web apps, or if you're working with container apps or something like that. I've learned that hands-on labs are somewhat expensive to run to get the right coaches, and if you're going to get those kind of sandbox environments set up across the board. But the stickiness that they provide in an account and getting people building far outweighs the cost. So that's something just like to consider, because people, it really gets people hands-on and just used to using your technology. The other thing that I've found out also, and this kind of varies across companies, is the developer follow-up and customer support need to be connected. Like what I've seen a little bit at Avalara and other companies is, hey, customer support or get these tickets that are developer specific. And then all of a sudden these tickets sit for 2 or 3 days and don't go to the developer support team, and people are sitting there waiting, annoyed, and not getting help. That's the last thing you want to happen. You want to be able to have a streamlined customer support to developer support ticket, because ultimately the developer is there trying to implement your system. The worst thing you can do is not set expectations and be like, hey, I'm going to get you over to developer support. They'll get back to you really quickly, because they're so high pressured that if they don't get that information, they're going to get extremely irritated quickly. And it's something that I'll tell you, we are working on and streamlining at Avalara. It's because the customer support team was kind of siloed over here, and then the developer support team. So we're bringing them together to make that experience a lot better. And I'm just working on that because it's vital for, even though it's not developer marketing, it's vital for me if I'm going to build a community, as you probably all know. And I'm sure you've all had some horrible customer support help that where somebody says that's not my forte and they don't get you to developer support, and it's just a bad experience, let's be honest. So the other thing is just constantly checking the data, the developer analytics, and see the propensity of adding different developers and architects to a certain known account, and how much that ultimately goes into ROI, because that is key when you need to do kind of your business reviews and whatnot with with your either C-suite or VP level. So I'll pause there. Any questions, or should I just keep on finishing up, Nanan?
So it will be fine if you continue.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
And I can always come back to this slide. I know it's a little busy, but
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
and one thing to close out on that, the hands-on lab or open hacks are a really good way of also cross-selling or just informing developers of other services you have. One thing that at Avalara is we acquired so many different companies. I think it was like a year and a half ago, we were acquiring 3 different companies a quarter, which is insane. Let's say we're all still folding it into the suite, but everybody knows about, like, for the most part, AvaTax, and that's, calculating tax across county, city, different jurisdictions. But we also have the ability to do returns, e-invoicing, VAT across multiple 60 countries. And a lot of times we'll go into one of these hands-on labs, and the developer and the team have no idea of the other services that are provided that would just make their life easier. So that's another huge benefit when you're doing either an open hack that's usually one-to-many customers, or a hands-on lab that's one-to-one if there is a huge developer kind of team that needs help. And then lastly, I'll say one thing, doing developer marketing at Microsoft, being in that ecosystem for the last 10 years and then coming over to Avalara, the biggest nuance is that developer marketing obviously changes per company. I mean, we all know Azure, Microsoft is a huge cloud infrastructure, cloud compute company, where Avalara, and they won't say this on their website at all, but Avalara basically is a microservice in your greater cloud infrastructure. So how do you reach multiple developers personas, like multiple developer personas authentically basically to use Avalara as their, tax compliant cloud? Because basically we have done a developer persona kind of work, and our developers range all the way from WordPress, PHP developers, we're talking about building e-commerce websites, to .NET, to Java, and on the enterprise side. So one of the things that I am still obviously working through, I've been there about 3 months, is how do we scale to all those communities? And the best answer I have right now is, since Avalara built the partner network kind of similar at the ground up like Microsoft did way back in the day, is through partner dev motions are huge. So like going through Shopify, WooCommerce, GoDaddy Pro, Wix for like e-commerce types of sites, and then also through ERP, like working with NetSuite, Oracle. Obviously they're the same company, but like they're kind of 2 different kind of plays. And then going through working with Salesforce, as well as working through Microsoft, and scaling that developer message depending on if it's system integrator, ERP integrator that's doing like a customized connection to our service, or if it's the front end WordPress, PHP community like that WooCommerce is building, or even like from a Magento that's called now Adobe Commerce, reaching them authentically. So I've had to remedy that, because within Avalara, we have 3 or 4 pretty specific developer personas, where when I was working at Microsoft, it was like, hey, you can be any type of developer and just build on Azure, and I'll tell you why it's better than building on AWS. And then lastly, Avalara is like, and I don't know if this is relevant, but one thing that I noticed is Avalara's .NET framework, that's what's our engine's built out of. So 95% of our IP is built on .NET framework. Our whole, our cloud of record is AWS. When you are spending a good amount of money with AWS, you have a lot of cloud marketing perks to work with AWS. What I found at Avalara is nobody was taking advantage of those. So if you are at a company that has, you know, pretty good run rate or consumed revenue, cloud consumed revenue, I would check in with that cloud provider to make sure you're using all of the perks. Because, for example, AWS, we'll start doing blog posts with them. We'll also get on the AWS podcast. We're also going to do some type of case study. They're also really interested in the .NET framework running on AWS type of case study, because obviously they're trying to take share from Microsoft. So there's a lot of synergies there that people were not realizing at Avalara that can then scale through AWS's marketing engine that go a long way. And you know, that is something that I just started the last couple of weeks, and it will play a huge dividend for Avalara. So, and that is basically it. I can open it up for questions. Here, let me stop sharing. I just want to say thank you to everyone for taking the time out of your day, and you can always feel free to reach out to me or Nanad, and happy to answer questions.
Yeah, definitely, sir.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for this lovely session you gave, and it's very informational for every one of us, because we were not actually aware about what exactly is developer marketing, and we only knew the term that is developer, and when it goes in hand with developer and marketing.
Yes, it's interesting because developer market, it really shouldn't be called developer marketing, and it's almost and it's almost developer advocacy, I guess, from that aspect. And like sometimes I almost describe it that way, because the last thing I want to do is to market to developers, because I know a lot of people on this call are obviously developers are in that realm. And it's an, you know, it's annoying to get marketed to as a developer, because really you just want the information, you want to be able to consume it, understand it easily, and you ultimately want to make your own decision, because there are a lot of different products out there that do similar things, and how do you get that into your system and architecture? So
so basically, like that's a really interesting topic, to be honest, because I have always been through all these things. So we have a question here right now. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, let me see here.
Sure.
So yes, Rohit, from your the OU, and that's kind of an internal name that I've used for basically sales organization or segment, or the segment within how your company segments kind of businesses. So a dev buddy is basically like I would say a cloud solution architect, or even a cloud architect, that then is that first line of defense, and also the ability for the developer to reach out to the account team, but not reaching out to the sales team. So they would be able to help with like different things, and they could also bring in the engineering team or somebody else to help if needed, if that makes sense. So it's really, I personally think it's vital to, especially when you have enterprise accounts, that to have that kind of professional services layer. So then that person takes on the brunt of PMing a ticket to engineering, or getting a bug fix, or hey, this is not working. And you know, like what I was using container apps, this is not working correctly, what's wrong? Investigating that, being like, hey, you set it up wrong, this API needs to be this on this, you know, whatever. To then, oh, that's actually a bug, I need to get that done, and let me see it through and follow up with you and set expectations, and then you don't have to do any of that. So that's kind of what I'm saying from a dev buddy, because not everybody does it. Microsoft did it across some of them. Avalara is starting to do it with their developer support, because it is just important. So when you as developers don't have to waste your time checking in on that ticket or pushing that ticket along, or having to explain yourself for the 5th time because it went to tier 4 support or something like that. So I think it's key, and it goes a long way of building that also stickiness in a company, because that developer then becomes an advocate, and ultimately they might stay on Azure just because of that type of service, for example, was the thinking. Yeah.
You have another
That's a
question?
good question though, because I
Yeah.
think it's something that's missed a lot.
Yeah.
Like we have a lot, you have a lot of you have a lot of management with the CTO, the decision maker, but it's that second layer that's missed. And that's ultimately the person that is going to turn like an Azure consume revenue type of thing and implement more services and be more curious about services. So they, in my opinion, are more important than actually making the, dealing with the sale. So
that's a very good question, actually. Yeah.
yeah.
So he has one more question. Rohit has one more question. So
Oh yeah, I do
yeah.
see. Let me see.
Cybersecurity issues in big organizations.
Yes. So what I've seen, and maybe y'all can keep me honest too, but what I have seen over the last 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe even more years, is the developer engineer, IT pro, and even the security network people are now coming together more. And we've all heard the DevSecOps type wording, but they're coming together even more. So it's becoming key that development and cybersecurity has to start within the code and not be an afterthought like it used to be, when security and the network team in which would be like, hey, you actually can't do that, and but you're like, I already did all this. So it would help, because what I do is actually I focus on all three, to be honest. I call it developer marketing, but I feel IT pros are doing sometimes just as much code to say get Terraform implemented in their system that as like a developer is. And I feel like security is that way too, that security now advises the developer to make sure that's in the base level of the code as much as possible. I know there's always like somebody trying to hack, and not everything is foolproof, the zero trust type thing, but it starts at the base level, where before it used to be kind of a secondary thing. And I consider those three roles all within my suite, and I try and reach them that way too. So that's a good call out.
Yeah. We have another
And
question.
then I see another one that's
Yeah.
how exactly podcasts help in developer engagements. So podcast plays can be a kind of a twofold. Firstly, I they are a general awareness type play. So I would say a community kind of building play. So for example, Avalara is not as well known as obviously Azure. How do I get that name out to the masses? Go on like the AWS podcast, because we're already spending a lot of money with them yearly. Let's use those through. Also like a podcast like .NET Rocks, we're looking to possibly sponsor them. And then also people that go into the show notes, they'll click on the form, and if they want to get our developer newsletter, you can stay in touch with them. Now I'll say the traffic that actually goes into the show notes is a little low, but I still feel like it's valuable to sponsor and reach the masses that way. It's a way of kind of getting the Avalara name out to more people or more developers in a certain language at a cheaper price than, say, paying $100,000 to go to like a Java one, for example. Because the other one that I'm going to sponsor starting, I think I'll start this month, is Do the Woo podcast, which is the WooCommerce WordPress podcast. And for 18 months, We will be one of their pod friends, basically sponsor, and we're brought up 3 or 4 times throughout the podcast. And really, that engagement only cost me for 18 months. I think it was $15,000 or $20,000, and it's consistent. So just the repetition is key, because ultimately, I want all of you to, when you're developing, like say an e-commerce website, I'm not sure if anybody does on this, I want you to think Avalara when you come to calculating tax. And that's part of my battle, is like making sure the awareness is there. And that, I feel, goes a long way with podcasts, because you have those unique weekly listeners.
Yes, sir. That's
Yeah, thanks,
absolutely.
Rohit. Yeah.
Yeah.
The one thing I will say, because I
Yeah.
didn't talk about this a lot, is it is harder to show the ROI on sponsoring a podcast. So a lot of times, like with the AWS developer podcast, smaller, only 2 to 3 unique visitors, but like, I actually just reached out to those people and asked if we could go on there. So that's actually a free engagement. The sponsor one, sometimes it is harder to show ROI, but it's more of a community awareness and consistency play. But again, it might be hard for your direct report or VP or CMO to understand that. And that's why it's key to, then I would talk about all those other activities to do. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, sir, I had like a couple of questions myself.
Yeah.
So, you talked about open hack, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about, you told about there are hands-on lab,
Yeah.
one-on-one. So can you
Yeah.
explain about those labs to our community members?
Yeah. So like the hands-on labs I really got entrenched with, like, I'll tell you, the ones that I did were with a partner. So I'll give you an example. I worked closely with partnered devs at Microsoft, like Confluent, Elastic. The other one that was really accelerating over the last year or 2 years is Datadog. So we would do a hands-on lab with jointly with Datadog. They would, I think it was about 60 to 70 people, and we would walk through everybody. So one thing you have to do, because Microsoft, I'll tell you, has never solved for this, is to get sandbox environment. So basically, we have a third-party company called Spectra. They provide the environments for each and every person, so they can learn hands-on with the instructor. And then you need about, if you're having 60 people, you need at least about 4 or 5 instructors. Sometimes it's hard to coordinate that, or if somebody drops out. But then we walk through on how to implement Datadog for monitoring their apps, and how easy it is, because it's natively integrated. And that is one thing that Azure has done so good at, is like Elastic, Confluent, all natively integrated and easy to set up. And then you can all manage it in your portal. So it's really those hands-on experiences to then, and sometimes you will have companies that will use their own environments, and that's even a better play, obviously, because then they will start using it too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
So there's one more question. Like,
Okay.
we talking about developer and marketing in the same term.
Yeah.
So can you name some of the tools that can be used for developer marketing that are very commonly used in Avalara or Microsoft?
Yeah. I would say, so one of the key is, this is a hard kind of tool to solve, because I think Avalara, we have Hootsuite, but probably the top in class type of tool is Sprinkler. But like doing the social listening, social queues is really huge this day and age, especially when, if you have open source projects. And we've all seen like Microsoft stub their toe on different, like, the .NET hot reload issue. So you want to be constantly listening. We have Hootsuite, not as good, but you want to have some type of layer, if you can, to be listening socially across the globe, to get those signals and be like, oh, these people are having issues with this and that, and then also to be able to track your social campaigns. And then the other, I mean, that is probably one of the main ones. And then the other one is just to, yeah, I mean, it could be anything from Adobe Experience Manager or as easy as like, building an HTML newsletter, but staying in touch with a simple newsletter. And it seems to me a good recipe is to make it easily consumed, but then make it language specific.
Yeah.
Java, PHP, WordPress, and then, .NET. And then that way, as a developer, you can go in, oh, I want to go down to here. Awesome. Here's the WordPress stuff. Oh, cool. This WooCommerce and GoDaddy Pro thing or whatever. So, so that's how I think is key. And you only send those quarterly. Do not
Okay.
you don't want to spam them. Obviously, or I would say monthly would be fine too, but like not every week, because then you'll get a lot of unsubscribes because it's just repetitive. So
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So also, sir, like as you said about developer workshops. So what kind of workshops are you referring to this category basically?
Yeah, so I'll take that's kind of twofold in regards to developer workshops. It's more of the one thing is you stay close to like the account teams and see where the opportunity is like, I know right before I left Microsoft, we had this huge need for Best Buy to use Power Apps and low code to enable across their company and the communication, and also just make it easier for maybe even less tech people. Probably not the most developer focused, but what we then got is the sales team coming to us to find a solution. And usually you build that from a customer need. And that's the same type of thing. I'll give you an example from Avalara is like, we have a bunch of SDKs that obviously are used to connect to our services and, API information integration guide. There was an ask from partner about a JavaScript TypeScript SDK specific to their needs, and then we did kind of an investigation, and it looked like it would affect about 300-400 type partners. So we built that per their feedback, and then what we will do is do kind of a I guess you could call it a private preview or kind of beta or even a UAT with them to then get it up and down, and you can run a workshop to get their feedback before you go completely live with that SDK. So
So
and I think it's really when you hear I build those around when you listen to the customer basically. So,
the customer feedback is very important. That's true.
A lot of times people don't listen to the customer, and it's something that like at Avalara, I went from Microsoft with 180,000 employees to Avalara that has 4,000. We are getting really specific on obviously listening to the customer and not doing things just because we have a hypothesis that it works. So it's something that's hard because like you kind of, as a human, you go with your feelings. I feel this and I think it will work, but you have to like get data obviously to back it up, and it's easier said than done. But if you can't, then you better make sure that you can pivot quickly, because it's you don't want to waste money or get very low or ROI on that type of thing.
Yeah. So sir, like this question has been just like hitting my mind a lot. So I had a question. So we have discussed about like there are terms like YouTube. So there are platforms like YouTube. We have corporate events, as well as we have the newsletters. So in seeing today's scenario, so what do you think, which one of these modes is more better to actually spread the awareness of developer marketing to people?
So here, like, and this is why I have like those different mediums is, and I'll say this was something when I was going through what Avalara has for developers, it popped up is some developers want to learn with documentation and examples and whatnot, and I think we did a pretty good job on our developer partner at Avalara doing that. Others want to watch 3 to 5 minute YouTube videos. So you have to know that people learn differently and provide that access. Now, Avalara, it's one of my next year priorities is to get our integration guides, SDKs, and all the other API information in these kind of snippets of 3 to 5 minutes. I'll see how much of that I get done just because of different priorities, but I think it's key to provide that, because sitting next to developers at Microsoft, I saw them just go to YouTube most of the time, and then there'd be one that would like to look through the documentation. So you want to make sure that you're enabling, and it's kind of like, lack of a better word, accessibility, like how people like to learn. And I would say the more mediums you can provide that way are key. Like some like the newsletter, but ultimately maybe you might have a newsletter that clicks off to documentation and or the YouTube. So you have those two different versions.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So it completely depends on the person's choices. So if he wants to read,
if
he wants to attend an event, or if he just want to go for a YouTube video, short video.
Exactly, for sure.
Yeah. So, sir, I will request you I'll like to request you something. So, from your point of view, the amount of experience you have, vast amount of experience in developer marketing, product marketing. So what would you tell this generation people to follow? I mean, will it be only hard work? Will it be smart work? Or what it will be? It's a combination of both.
I know most of you on this call are like developers by trade, or obviously in in this realm. The one thing that I've learned just being in developer marketing around developers is how fast different things can pop up, like from a development tool. Like, let's just talk about Java, and Java EE was like the master class, and then Oracle did a horrible job managing that group, and it kind of died off. Now I'll say Java EE is alive because of Reza Rahman in Microsoft, and he's kept that and resurrected it. But that's why you now see the Spring framework for Java developers being the main focus, and I think it's about 2/3 use Spring framework now, and that came from Pivotal VMware. But the key is like always to be kind of learning and understanding, but then also making sure you don't just jump from one thing to the next, because there are things that pop up. I'm sure you all see it and they go away, but always continue to be aware of what is happening around you, and then just craft what you do best, because you guys are in high demand. Like if we could replicate what this group times like 100,000, there still would be a shortage in engineers and developers. So there's a huge demand, and if you can hone into one thing and become a expert on that is key. I mean, if you want to learn more, that's totally fine too. It just depends on what you want to use your free time with too. So, because I know everybody has private public life too. So
yeah, that's absolutely. And sir, like one question. So where do you see developer marketing going in the next 5 years?
I think like there might be a full shift, like we were talking about, in regards to like calling developer marketing just developer advocacy. I know we've seen DevRel focus like developer relations kind of departments. I think we might go away from the word marketing and fold in there. But what we will still see, I think, to this day, because it happened with Microsoft when they got rid of DX and that developer side, but there will always be knee-jerk reactions to cut like developer relations or developer advocacy, just because the ability to show ROI is not there. I mean, especially as we move into this kind of economic climate that for the next, I think, 1 to 2 years, we won't have as much free spending cash we had over the last 12 to 13 years. So that will still happen. It will be detrimental to the companies, but I think one thing, if anybody gets into developer marketing or in that side of the realm, or even anything that touches it, like developer advocacy, DevRel, as much as you can show that you are touching accounts is the best. Like if you're doing like a through partner or working with the account team, it just highlights and shows the ROI, as I think I've said it now 4 times, is to the ability to show the ROI, and then it makes the business, it makes the business stronger and ultimately your marketing stronger as well. So
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. And
yeah,
I had one last question for you.
yeah,
So it's something that not related to developer marketing, maybe, but I'll just give it to
yeah.
you in
Ask
top of
it.
my head.
Yeah.
So like we all have been introduced about DALL-E, the thing that is text to image generator.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to know, like, so we have seen that software or the product which has been launched in the market recently. So is Avalara trying to plan something sort of like that in the developer fields, like, or something from text to image converter or image to text
Yeah.
converter?
That's interesting. So Avalara, I'll say, we have a lot of products, obviously, because we acquired a lot of companies. One thing that we are marching toward, but I think it probably won't be ready until like this next year, is kind of a super API suite that is enabled through this product called Integration Studio. Integration Studio is out, but it's just being used internally for all the apps that we have built for our customers. But it's a low code, easy implementation of multiple APIs, and it's kind of a plug and play to make it easier for the developer to then do that customized developing and coding if they're having to do it for like a Shopify app or for like an ERP system like Dynamics. So that is where we are marching towards, specifically trying to make the implementation of API standardized within our products, because we have about 30, 40 products these days.
Yeah.
And we still need to fold them in. And then also that Integration Studio allows for less custom, not custom, but allows for less development time on connecting it to your system. So it's similar in that aspect of like the idea around it, Nanad,
Yeah.
the text image type thing.
Yeah.
And it's, and you know, like I think if anybody saw GitHub Universe about like the Copilot updates that
Yeah.
were happening, it's pretty crazy that, yeah. So we're moving that way. I would say we'll be slower than most just because of the size of our company and the global scale, but we do have a good roadmap, and I think with that engineering team on a weekly basis. So yeah.
Yeah. So like it's absolutely a last question for us for the session. Like
Yeah.
for the people joining Avalara in the future, very soon, with any position they want to apply. So what will be your word of advice to those people?
If you're joining as an Avalara developer, my suggestion is just to get oriented and also like a developer buddy internally. Sometimes joining, like when I joined, it was hard to navigate the internal systems, and also like as an internal engineer, you want to streamline all that. So it's key to get connected with an onboarding buddy that has that information, because I've seen some people at Avalara not get that, and they get really frustrated. The thing is we are enabling some awesome tax products and code, so it will be fun building that type of thing. I know tax compliance isn't like the sexiest thing, but the technology behind it is pretty unbelievable in regards to being able to calculate tax by county, city, state. Oh, it was this type of product, not this product. It's pretty amazing. And ultimately, we are a leader in that group. I know there's other companies like TaxJar that was bought by Stripe, but we have the foundation, and now being owned by Vista, also the ability to scale. So it will be streamlined, and you'll get the resources you need. So we're focusing on the product first. So it's going to be a fun time at Avalara over the next 2 to 3 years as we expand, because Vista, if you're not aware, Vista Equity Partners is a company that bought Marketo. I think it was like 6-7 years ago, and then 3 years later they sold it to Adobe. So like that is kind of what our trajectory will probably be in regards to the next 3 or 4 years. We get to this point, we start scaling, then they'll probably go out to a larger buyer to buy it. That's usually how they exit. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you so much, sir, for
Yeah,
coming
thank you, everyone.
for this webinar, and thank you everyone for attending this webinar. And
yes, I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you so much, sir, for giving your very valuable time to this webinar. And coming on this webinar is like, it's a big opportunity for me to interview you. And
thank you. You did awesome, and I appreciate everybody in the community too.
Thank you so much, sir. It's my first international webinar, so thank you so much for your support. And I really hope that many of us watching today, watching you today, will be inspired from your talks today, and will definitely, you never know who will land up in Avalara soon.
Yeah, true. Yeah. That is true. And feel free to reach out to me anytime or not. If somebody reaches out to you and has any other questions, feel free. So I appreciate it. Definitely. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
All right,
I'll
bye.
stop the recording.